We're gonna get right into it, man. So I want to look at something a little bit differently tonight. How you feel about the school system today? How you feel about that?
I'm gonna tell you like this, man. I think they're working tirelessly and they're doing the best that they can. And I think, unfortunately, there are certain obstacles that are needless and shouldn't be there outside of the normal organic ones that already exist.
So I think we got some opportunities, and I think tonight we're gonna be able to look at some things because here's what it boils down to. I got three children. I got three children that go to school,
Mm-hmm.
and I got to tell you some of the battles that I went through. It's been kind of a nightmare to deal with, but you do what you got to do for your kids. So it's just ironic that teachers are feeling some of the woes that we're talking about tonight. And as we go through this clip that I got for us, we're going to get to talk about some of the things that's going on. We're going to get to dissect a little bit of it, and we're going to kind of get some insight on what's actually what's really happening. Because here's the thing, I feel like everything is a business. The
Mm-hmm.
schooling system is a business.
Right.
Medical field is a business. I
Facts.
work for retail, which is obviously a business. So
Mm-hmm.
with all that being said, man, I want to really get into some of this stuff, and let's let some of the other people here talk about it and let us chime in on it, because
Yeah.
I think it's something to be talked about. So
Let's
without
do
further
it.
ado, I'm gonna go ahead. I'm gonna put the clip up. We're gonna stop and pause and talk as we go. But I
Mm-hmm.
think we got something good for the people tonight. So here we go.
Let's
20
get
teachers
it.
who have quit.
30, 20, 25.
Teachers are quitting by the masses.
Teachers that were just colleagues of mine were in tears coming to me saying, I'm so glad you got out. I'm so glad you got out.
Educators are quitting their jobs in alarming numbers. Schools are missing hundreds of thousands of staff, and more than half of educators say they're thinking of leaving.
And I resigned my position as teacher.
I submitted my resignation last week.
I will be leaving Gwinnett County Schools.
So why are they so desperate to get out? Teaching was never easy, right?
It's not the way it used to be.
Was it COVID?
The education crisis was very much here way before COVID.
Are the kids out of control?
And that's not it at all.
This is failure by design. The education system is crumbling because America's politicians made it fail.
So I'm gonna stop it right there. Right,
Mm-hmm.
they mentioned a lot early on. They
Yeah.
talked about COVID. They talked about politicians. They talked about a lot.
Right.
And I'm gonna tell you, man, just from a personal standpoint, I remember that COVID situation
Right.
when the kids couldn't go to school and they were doing school from home. It was many times where I was home because I was furloughed from work. I wasn't leaving the house. I was here. So I got to see kind of some of the things that was happening. The kids weren't doing anything. Like the teachers was just as disengaged as the students on their cell phones doing this, that, and the next. It was like there was really no learning going on. It was a lot of, oh, well, your assignment is on this app, and this is where you're going to go to find your notes and do this work, and I'll check it when I check it.
Right.
It was so bad to where it wasn't even like you didn't know when the work was coming back. The school term would end, and the students didn't even have grades yet because the teachers haven't caught up to it.
Wow.
Like it was crazy during those times, man.
Ridiculous.
It was ridiculous, but I gotta give them this. They weren't prepared for COVID, right?
Right.
I understand that piece. You weren't prepared for what was coming down the pipe, and then all of a sudden everything that you've known has changed. But I even think it goes a little bit further, because as we continue to watch this video, you're going to get some insights, and it's going to give us a lot of conversation. So I'm gonna
Okay.
you want to chime in before I go?
I'll wait. I like to have all the information present.
Got you. Here we go.
Funded, abandoned during COVID, and vilified in America's vicious culture war. Teachers have had enough. The real losers are the kids.
So this is a box full of stuff that my kids made me. It's a girl that's in darkness and trapped in chains, which is sad because that's how I felt. I was the director of school counseling. It was the largest junior high in Indiana. This is a card of somebody drowning. Like, that's full circle.
Anna Sutter counseled over 600 kids. Her colleagues started quitting and weren't replaced, so
I was doing lunch duty, hallway duty, bus duty. I explain it in the sense that like I was spinning 100 plates and I only had the capacity to spin 25 plates. I was working 13-hour days and not sleeping, not eating. But then as soon as one plate fell, just the feeling of failure.
I gotta stop it again.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason I stop it is because I understand that feeling. Right? Now, I'm not a teacher. I work retail. Now, if you work retail as a general manager and you're the head dog in any building, at one point I managed a building that did $25 to $30 million a year. You spin multiple plates. You work 12 to 13-hour days.
Mm-hmm.
Like this was just a natural. It wasn't something that I set up and complained about. It was just something that I realized that I had to do it because when you have a building that's 120, 130 square feet and you're generating this type of revenue, your presence had to be felt. Right. Now, as a teacher, I can't explain what that feels like if you work a 13-hour days because my work did not involve me reading papers or grading paperwork and all that kind of good stuff.
Mm-hmm.
I was also paid differently.
Of course.
And and I think you'll hear it a little bit differently as the video goes on. There's a huge disparity with what teachers were making versus what I was making, and I'm in retail, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, I hear her talking about she was working the 13-hour days. To me, that's something normal. That's not something that's out of my wheelhouse. So it makes me question like what the gripe is.
Okay. Let me go ahead and say it like this. You work 13-hour days, right? Now, what is a normal work day?
8.
So when you look at it, I always tell people life is all about perspective, right? How you look at things can go ahead and shape how things go ahead and are perceived. From a leadership perspective, working 13 hours versus 8 is you being a team player, right? You going ahead and pitching in when the need of the company goes ahead is there. Hurrah. But the problem becomes when it's expected. And there's a bit of entitlement that occurs at that point in time. You expect these employees to go ahead and stand up. And then when they don't, you're going to say, all right, well, don't say anything when, Rodriguez gets the promotion, and it's like little things like that are little jabs that the industry has learned to manipulate the situation. So yes, you should be congratulated for working 13 hours. No, the person that works their 8-hour shift shouldn't be looked at as they're not. What is their gripe? Their gripe is they just want to work an 8-hour shift and go home.
I think they call that today quiet quitting.
Well, quiet quitting to me. Well, I don't know.
Well, from what I gather, right? You work your shift, you go home. You don't do more than what you're paid to do, and eventually, I guess people just kind of evaporate into the ether.
I think quiet quitting is a little bit more in depth because yes, it does. It does revolve around not doing more than what you are obligated to, but it's also not going ahead and having the same life that you would in a job, right? Some jobs require certain creativities to go ahead and make things work. And people are like, well, if you don't give me the tools to go ahead and make it happen, this is not going to get done. right? It's a whole different type of mentality when you're talking about quiet quitting. You quit on the inside, and you become only as productive as you have to be, which for a company is they benefit off of the extra little production that they get from free for workers, right?
Gotcha.
I mean,
Yeah.
you get what I'm saying? It's the honest, they're trying to squeeze as much as they possibly can get out of somebody for the same price. That's good business, you know? But yeah, you're right. Let's keep rolling.
Let's keep rolling.
Anna quit in March with no job lined up.
Walking to class, just walking to class, don't mind the shoes, man. Just to go into an empty class with no teacher, like, this gotta stop, bro.
It is so bad, I want to give you a 0, but that's not possible. So I give you a 1.
There was no sub nor teacher in our class for the whole period.
Millions of kids are showing up to classrooms with no permanent teacher.
We don't have subs, and we're just getting, whoever we can get that will come in and basically babysit.
So we had kids like academically not doing well. We might have a technology person covering a PE class or social studies covering a math class.
They're calling our bullshit. They know that we're just cycling people through.
We wanted our students to see.
Fully fund public education.
Shut it down! Shut it down!
Teachers called out the deepening crisis for years.
Well, I cry bullshit. You don't respect us. If you respected us, you'd listen to us. You don't appreciate us. If you did, you wouldn't make our jobs literally impossible to do.
They pleaded with legislators for decent wages, but nationally, salaries went down.
We are making 10% less money than we were a decade ago.
That's in Indiana. In Missouri, officials just raised the minimum starting salary to $38,000. But it's temporary. They'll go back to $25,000 soon. Know who makes more?
Those aren't even living wages. Those are more.
Bro, that is the stamp right there, bro. That is that's a wild statement.
So with this being the point, right? I told you this video kind of strikes a point where my kids, and this is anecdotal.
Mm-hmm.
I spoke to my middle child,
mm-hmm.
and she told me she went to school one day and they didn't have a teacher.
Wow.
The teacher just stopped showing up.
Wow.
And she was like, every quarter there was a different person there. She goes, I don't even think they were teachers because they weren't given assignments. They were just telling them to go online. And that's where they would find whatever it is they had to do. My son had an experience where the teacher walked out, like literally walked out. So if you got teachers walking out, you got teachers that just decide they're not going to show back up to work, and you don't even have a backup plan to have substitutes. Because at some point they just had babysitters. It wasn't even substitutes anymore. It was babysitters in the classroom.
Yeah.
Yo, we're in bad times. Shout out to the people that can send their kids to private schools and they're getting the education that they deserve. But from a public standpoint, yo, we're failing.
Yo, and the thing about it is the only people that are there to blame are the individuals in charge of how much they get paid, right? And that's where the issues lie, because it's not fair to have the people that are sculpting the future minds of America and having them make $25,000. I don't know the last time, when I was working for a corporate gig that I ever made $25,000, bro. Like, that's, I don't know the math on that, but what's that, like $2,000 a month? And that's before taxes. So you're telling me They make $2,000 a month before taxes. The price of rent just went up, right? So now here's the funny part. A 1-bedroom across America probably ranges now somewhere between 15 to $2,000, 1,500 to $2,000 a month. So you telling me that they don't even make enough to pay their rent, and it's fair?
Well, I'm not going to get into what's fair and what's not, but I am going to get into this because as you went to school to go to be a teacher, right?
Mm-hmm.
I look at how do you supplement the lack of income you're getting from the job, which is basically, as a teacher, I would assume tutoring, right? That's how you would kind of pick up extra income. But what it boils down to is if you send your kid to a public school, odds are people don't have the money for the tutoring that you're charging for.
Not even. It's a logistics thing, right? We always think about the extra that we can do, but if you listen to what she said, she's working 13-hour days. There's not enough time in the day for her to be able to do anything. They command majority of her time. She's going to be at school going ahead and teaching.
Did you hear if they were salaried or hourly? I'm assuming salaried.
Salary.
Yeah.
She said they raised it temporarily to 38, but it's going to go back down to 25.
Yeah.
So,
okay.
So now if you majority of your time is being commanded over there, do you expect these people to go ahead and suffer from sleep deprivation? Because you had to incorporate travel time, and it used to take me about an hour and a half to 2 hours to get to work on a good day when I lived 30 miles away, because that's what you had to do. You couldn't live close to work because all of those places are expensive. Do you see the logistics happening here? So you got to understand there's got to be a little bit of give for these people to survive, because they're living paycheck to paycheck and the paycheck is not even covering their daily life outside of where they live. They're supposed to live in the hood with rats and work all of this time on under salary. At what point, under what point does it become predatory, right? Because if you ever look at Congress, I say this all the time, guarantee you take 1 second to go and switch to C-SPAN and just spend 15 minutes listening to them debate on the budget for education. Guaranteed every Republican is going to go ahead and say cut it. They always want to cut funding to that. They put people like Betsy DeVos as charge as superintendent of schools. And you wonder why we're not getting anything done? You have somebody who's not even qualified to go ahead and be in Congress, let alone being in charge of all schooling for the entire nation. It trickles down and it becomes a huge problem. And then we're sitting here wondering why there's a problem. I'm surprised why people haven't seen it. It's right there. It's dead in people's faces. These people's, they sculpt the minds of our future. Like,
I got you.
What else is there to say?
And I'm gonna be honest with you, you know, I don't think my children are getting the same experience I got out of school, because I could talk to you about Mrs. Curling, Mr. Singer, Mr. Infante, Miss Patakis. Like, I remember these names because they made an impact, right?
Yeah.
I don't think the children are getting that same type of impact.
No.
Now, I might not remember every assignment, but I remember going to those classes and being engaged. Right. I remember going to those classes and taking something away from them. Mm-hmm. You know, I even my Spanish teacher, Mr. Mumford, right?
Yeah.
He was different. But you know what? I remember some of the stuff he taught me.
Mm-hmm.
Mr. Mullings. We used to play spades in his class, right? He played spades. But here's the thing about Mr. Mullings. He didn't play no games. He would teach you the lesson on Monday. He would give you the homework for Tuesday. You could play spades on Wednesday and Thursday. On Friday, there was a quiz.
You better get 100 on that joint. You better get on it on that joint.
So if you really sit back and look at it, he was preparing you to just be self-sufficient. I mean, that was an experience that we went through, and I think that the whole landscape of education has changed. But let's continue moving forward. Let's see what's going on.
Or starvation wages, and that's why people have to keep 2 and 3 jobs just to survive.
I worked at an ice cream shop,
grocery delivery,
a tutor, waited tables,
Uber and Lyft, bouncer.
I work approximately 60 to 70 hours per week. I'm exhausted.
And then came COVID.
They want their kids back in the classroom.
The heated debate over masks is escalating into physical altercations.
Masks weren't the problem. When schools reopened, many kids returned traumatized.
It went from prioritizing student needs to prioritizing crises.
I am expected to be a teacher, to be a counselor, to be a social worker, to be a nurse, to feed, clothe, shelter.
There were times where I had to do 5 suicide assessments in one day.
They missed almost 2 years of being socialized.
Kids were missing basic skills.
They couldn't handwrite because they had done everything virtually.
This is just your reminder to check in on your teacher friends because this shit is not easy.
I'm joining the crying in your car teacher trend because you just feel like everything you do is shit.
And educators who actually made it through the last 2 years are facing this.
Please stop the sexual grooming of our children.
We're not gonna let them put the books on the shelf.
Public schools have vivid pornography in it.
It's really frustrating to hear about whether it be how we're indoctrinating or how we're teaching the wrong things or how we need cameras to watch us because we're not doing the right stuff.
Our school system is for educating kids, not indoctrinating kids.
Yeah, Florida had thousands of teacher vacancies this year.
Stop indoctrinating our children.
Stop indoctrinating their kids with crazy messages.
In the last 2 years, over a dozen states have prioritized passing laws to restrict what teachers can teach or even say. Those same states have some of the worst teacher vacancy rates in the nation.
I think that that's absolutely driving a ton of people out of the profession.
By putting censorship first, politicians with their warped priorities are deflecting from the real problem, making sure kids even have teachers.
We rely on teachers to not give a about themselves. We rely on teachers to not care about themselves. We rely on teachers to not know their worth and to not know what they deserve.
When we have no adult in the classroom, it sends a message directly to the kids, and that is, no one really cares about me. If you cared, you'd be here. It feels like abandonment.
So there you go. That's what it boils down to. So go ahead, cap it off.
The real losers in this situation are always going to be the kids, right? They're going to be the ones that lose the absolute most. Because I don't fault the teachers, because at the end of the day, you're not obligated to go ahead and get a subpar wage and stay in this position, right? Once you find out you're in a drowning situation, you throw yourself a life vest and you get up on out of there, right? So the message that the kids feel that, you know, that that is sent, that is nobody cares. This is a true message, but that burden falls on a different crowd other than the teachers. Because I think the teachers care, but I think it's a burden enough to go ahead and see the lack of tools that you even have to go ahead and teach these children, right? You're in a situation that's not getting any better. One can almost liken this to the situation with politics in Haiti. Every time they get into office, they see they don't have enough money to go ahead and do things, and then they end up turning corrupt and pocketing the money for themselves. You know, it's. I don't think the burden of this falls on the teachers. I think the burden of this falls on the people that are supposed to be paying them, because if they really cared, they would pay the teachers what they're worth, considering their importance, right? And if they're that important, give them the money. I don't know if I'm accurate. Somebody correct me if I'm wrong, but doesn't the Florida lottery, don't they have funds going to the public schools?
So
right,
that was the case.
Right. So what's
that's
going
how we
on?
started, but it's about how you finish, right?
Yeah, and that's a problem, because it's like, if you have this much money in the lottery, why is there a problem with the schools, right? And it's almost like somebody doesn't want them to be educated.
I don't know if it's the fact that they don't want them to be educated. I think they just don't put the emphasis on it like it's supposed to be.
Yo, but
that's what it boils down to. The emphasis isn't there, and we're focused on a lot more things than what we should be focused on. Now, I will say this, right? With the empty classrooms, I shared earlier where my daughter told me they didn't have a substitute. They had people in the class, babysitters, so to speak, right? In the classroom every quarter. My son said he had a teacher that walked out of class. And I get anecdotal experience because this hits close to home. But what it boils down to is this, right?
Right.
Our students are witnessing something that's going to impact them for the rest of their life. And at the end, they kind of brought it all together and said, nobody cares. Well, no, I won't say nobody cares. The parents care. We just need that counterpart that cares as much as we do. And they're not reciprocating that. But it all goes back to, we have to be involved in what goes on in our school district boards and things of that such. On one of the shows I talked about, I had to go to City Hall. I don't know if you remember that or not. But it's the same thing when it comes to your children. You have to be involved with your school. You have to be involved with the school board. You have to find out what's going on. Because if there's no plan to deal with some of the things that we're dealing with, then your kids are the ones who eventually suffer. And that puts a burden on the parents. It's known that most households need 2 incomes to be able to sustain. Right? So if we're depending on sending our kids to school to get the education, and we can't really put that time in, we need our school boards to be stable. And that seems like what's missing, because our teachers are disengaged. They're underpaid and they don't know which way to go. And then the world is changing. So let's get past COVID. Let's look at some of the social activity. Stop indoctrinating our children, right? That's a huge one. That's a big one that, I'm going to be honest with you, I'm even sitting here afraid to talk about, right?
I get what you're saying, right? Because I get it. I think that message there is one of those that there has to be some level of scrutiny there, right?
It does.
I'm not going to say that, there isn't a place for LGBTQ, right? But I think that when I went to school, when I started learning about sexuality was when I had health class, right? And I think the age jumped real early in when that started to be taught to kids, with drag queens reading story time and stuff of that nature, right? And it's just like, well, why? And I think some people, I'm not going to say all, some people can't find an answer to why. And so they move towards the thought process of, well, this must be some type of indoctrination, because I don't have any logical explanation for this. And then there's other people on the other end that are like, well, what's the harm in it? there's a space for everybody. There's a space for diversity, inclusivity, and things of that nature.
That's perfect. And let me just jump in. I'm sorry. I cut you off. That's not my intention. But here's, I'm good with everything. I'm good with all of that, right? But when I send my kids to school, reading, writing, arithmetic, focus on that.
Right.
You get me that piece, and then I'll deal with everything else.
Right.
And that's as simple as that. I'm not looking for anybody to be excluded. I want everybody to be included.
Right.
But when I send my kids to school, reading, writing, arithmetic. Now, I remember back in the day, I took sex ed, right? There was a sign-off sheet that had to be signed.
Right.
Give me that choice.
And I think that's where everything lies, right? Because I'm not going to argue the righteousness on any side, right? But I will say this, that the bottom line is, if a parent has a child, it is their child. It is their decision ultimately what this child is going to go ahead and intake, right? So, you know, in any other setting, a parent would be hard-pressed to have somebody else tell them how to raise their child, especially knowing that they're not the ones investing in their child. They're not the ones going ahead and planted the seed and made the child grow and develop into what they are today. So they're not going to go ahead and accept any input that they don't accept, period. And I think that's the bottom line on it. You know, whether it's right, whether it's wrong, it doesn't matter. If a parent says, hey, I don't want my kid in XYZ, that's it. Whatever you think about it is fine. Everybody has an opinion, and it's respected. But at the end of the day, that kid goes home with that parent, and that's that.
So all in all, we got some stuff going on in our school system. Our teachers feel underappreciated. Let me say this. As somebody who has their child in a public school, I appreciate the teachers that's standing in the paint. I appreciate the ones that's standing in there and trying to adapt to this new world. I appreciate the ones who are trying to make sure the kids got the best chance coming out of this school. Without you, a lot of us will be lost, right? Because people got to go to work. They got to provide a lifestyle and they got to make sure their family is good. We can't do that without our teachers. So for the ones that's standing in there, I appreciate you. Now, for the ones that fell out, I understand why you did it. I get it. You invested time to go to school, to get your certifications to become a teacher. And then everything the rug was pulled from up underneath you. I understand your thought process. I wish the best for you, but here's what it boils down to. We got to think about our kids. We got to think about the kids that are going through this program and don't understand what's actually happening to them. And again, I talk from anecdotal experience. I'm not talking from a broad spectrum and saying, oh, this is what people need to do. No, I'm involved in my kids' school. I'm involved with the school board. I do these things because I'm concerned about it. My son has had teachers walk out. Listen, walk out like they quit a job, bro.
Yeah.
I don't know what that looks like because my teachers in school never did this.
Right. But I also heard of my teachers getting paid somewhere upwards of about $65,000 to $70,000 a year.
If I had a teacher, right, they might have missed school. You get a substitute, you pick on the substitute, the teacher comes back the next day.
That's
the most I know.
That was it. But I think there's
they're leaving like they're like, forget this, I'm going to work at Publix. It's like, hold on, wait a minute. You got a whole classroom sitting here waiting for you.
But whose obligation is that?
It's insane.
Whose obligation is that?
It's insane.
Yeah, but I just, I'm just curious because it's almost like, it's like, no, teacher, you can't leave. There's kids over here. They're not getting paid. The bottom line is people will care as long as they're able to live, right? But your priority in life is to take care of your star player. As much as you could go ahead and be like, I'm a, do this for the love of the kids, you still have to be mindful that these people have to be able to live. It's I don't support kids getting walked out on at all. But at the end of the day, what would you expect? Right? And does every other job have an advantage where because there's no kids there, if you're not getting paid right, you could walk off? Like is that the guideline? As long as there's not kids involved, you can walk off? Because I think it's very unfair, right? I think that we already know, research will tell you, you treat your workers right, you get productivity.